everybody, so with the release of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, I thought it'd be a great time to finally do a TMNT ranking on the channel. For as long as I can remember, I have been a massive fan of TMNT, whether it be the comic books, the animated series, or the films. I've consumed a lot of Turtles media in my lifetime, and what's so special about this franchise to me is that there are so many different interpretations of the Turtles at large. Some of them that are more lighthearted, while others are a bit more mature, but that's what makes this brand so interesting to me. Of course, this is just my personal ranking of the franchise, and full disclosure, I'm discussing the theatrically released TMNT films. I'm not talking about Rise of the TMNT, the movie, or Batman vs. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, although I do love both of those movies. We're just talking about the theatrical stuff here. But make sure you share your rankings down below in the comment section, and let's get on to my last place pick. In 7th place, I have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. For as long as I can remember, this has been the Turtles film I have disliked the most. Even as a kid growing up when this came out, I owned all 3 of the 90s films on VHS, and I very rarely ever watched this one. A time travel concept taking the Turtles to 17th century Japan on paper sounds like a pretty awesome idea. It's just so poorly executed in the film that it's just completely wasted potential. There still is some charm to the movie just because of the Turtles, but this by far is probably the worst they've ever looked in this trilogy. Plus the story here, it's just very weak. There's nothing exciting about it, which is a shame because, like I said, this is a cool idea, and you even have the fact that you have Casey Jones basically being a babysitter for the entire movie, taking care of these Japanese guys. At this point, you can see the cracks starting to show, and Turtle Mania was kind of dying down at this point between this film and then TMNT The Next Mutation. Although I will say, as a kid, it was amazing seeing the Next Mutation cast with the Power Rangers in space. That was my Spider-Man No Way Home when I was a kid, losing my mind. But yeah, that show and TMNT 3, really bad. In 6th place, I have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2014. For this being a newer, more modern interpretation of the Turtles in live action, the Michael Bay films, they're serviceable. The core foundation of what I enjoy is there. The Turtles are fun, they have a good amount of solid humor and entertaining action set pieces that really go over the top, since for some reason in this interpretation, they made the Turtles completely massive and Shredder even more so. Shredder is like a 20-foot tall death machine. Don't get me wrong, it still looks pretty cool visually, but this film really goes over the top, which kind of makes sense because even though Michael Bay didn't direct this, it very much feels like a Michael Bay inspired TMNT. What bogs down this interpretation for me though is the story at large. It is very much all over the place. You can tell that they had to do a lot of different reshoots in this movie to change things around, like Shredder's identity, and it just has a lot of weird story decisions. Like, I never liked the fact that April O'Neil, the Turtles were her childhood pets. I just always found it to be a very weird addition to the franchise. It's not a horrible film by any means, but it's not like an amazing film either. In 5th place, I have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows. Of the 2 Michael Bay produced TMNT films, I do like Out of the Shadows a little bit more. It's a good follow-up to the 2014 film. It showcases the Turtles, their personalities, and has more as a fan that I can enjoy, which does include many of the iconic characters of the franchise, whether it be Bebop and Rocksteady, Krang, Baxter Stockman. It's kind of surreal that it took this long to have Krang be a villain in a live-action TMNT film. Similar to how I felt about 2014, the story here is what bogs it down. Arguably, I think the story in this film is a bit more messy than the 2014 one, because there are certain chunks of Out of the Shadows where if you think too much about what's going on, things don't start to add up. And although I do love Stephen Amell, I thought he was great on Arrow. I was a big fan of the Arrowverse when it was on the CW. I don't think he was a very good Casey Jones. I thought he was a little bit too silly, too goofy, and one of the more frustrating things just as a TMNT fan, he hardly wears the mask. I mean, that's like one of the most iconic things about the character, and I think he only wears it for like one scene and that's it. And for as excited as I was going into this that Krang was going to be a villain in Out of the Shadows, I do think he was very heavily underused. But yeah, it's a decent follow-up to the 2014 film. In 4th place, I have TMNT. Out of all the various different films in the franchise, I always felt like TMNT is the one that is the most underappreciated and underrated. Most of all, what I like most about this interpretation is how it does explore surprisingly nuanced ideas that you wouldn't expect, such as the idea of what the Turtles are going to do after you stop Shredder, and you see how fractured they are after to find purpose. Now, the main plot of the movie does get a little bit strange with the villain's plot, interdimensional portals, and lots of different monsters, but I actually had a lot of fun with the fact that we're kind of going out of the box here with a strange concept. It's also kind of interesting going back and realizing just how great the voice cast was assembled for TMNT, because you have your heavy hitters like Casey Jones being voiced by Chris Evans, April O'Neil as Sarah Michelle Gellar. But you also have a lot of legendary voice actors in the cast. One big example is Nolan North as the voice of Raphael in this. Besides him being known for voicing Deadpool in a couple projects, he's also well known for voicing Nathan Drake in the Uncharted video game franchise. As your James Arnold Taylor as Leonardo, most of us now know him as the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi from the Clone Wars. It's certainly understandable why not every TMNT fan connects with this interpretation of the characters, but in the 16 years since the film is released, I really feel like it deserves a lot more love. In third place, I have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Secret of the Ooze. Out of all the various different films in the franchise, this is probably the one that I've watched the most. This is the one that I pretty much watched non-stop on VHS growing up, so that is the one I have the most nostalgia attached to. Even now, after all these years, I still have so much fun with it. It's silly, over the top, which is drastically different tonally than the first TMNT film, but I think it works for what the film is going for. While there are some elements that are very different between the first film and the second one, overall, I think the Turtles still are one of the best parts of the film. They have great action sequences, their banter with one another is hilarious, and I mean, you have other moments that are iconic or infamous depending on how you speak about the film, I guess, when you have the Turtles dancing to Vanilla Ice, or the stuff with Super Shredder at the very end. Ever since I watched it as a kid, I was always so bummed out that we got to see this huge Super Shredder played by Kevin Nash, and we don't get to see a big elaborate battle. He ends up basically defeating himself. By most metrics, Secret of the Ooze is not a good film, but I always have a blast watching it. I think it's just campy perfection. In second place, I have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1990. This is a film that over time I've respected more and more as I've gotten older. It's a genuinely well-made, solid classic comic book film, and it's actually a big reason into why I got into reading the original TMNT comic book. The 1990 film blends together nicely the more lighthearted nature from the 80s cartoon with how it portrays the Turtles and their personality, but also has a bit of that darker edge to it from that original comic book run. It gets a lot of the core ingredients right while also doing a great job with its story, allowing you to get invested in each and every one of the Turtles over the course of the film. Especially for back in 1990, it's super impressive even now to this day what Jim Henson's Creature Shop was able to do in bringing these Turtles to live action. Considering we're in a time period now with films where mostly everything is done with VFX, I mean even the Michael Bay films, the Turtles were CGI, it adds a little bit more charm to these that there's actually people in suits performing all these elaborate action sequences as the Turtles. For this being the first ever attempt at bringing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to live action, I think it does a fantastic job. And at number one, I have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. After now watching the film twice in theaters, I have to say, I think this is my favorite interpretation of TMNT on the big screen. The energy, the humor, the action, it's infectiously delightful, while still as well bringing something fresh and different to the table. Even though teenage is in the title Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, we never really see them act like teenagers, and in this interpretation, they are a much younger, a little bit more immature version of these characters, and it allows us to see a different style of film and how it builds up their growing bond and their different personalities shining through, adding a lot of heart to these brothers trying to show the world who they are fighting these different mutants. It's truly a win-win, because if you're a longtime fan of the franchise, I think you're going to have an even better time, but it's a good introduction if you're trying to get into TMNT, or if you're someone that's an adult that has kids and you want to see them get to see a new interpretation of the characters with gorgeous animation attached to it. All around, this movie is just a blast to watch. I had a smile on my face the entire time because of the action sequences being amazing, the animation style like I said, and it's pretty hilarious. There's a lot of jokes in here that I think you're going to laugh out loud at. And there you have it. That is my ranking on all the live action TMNT films. It's been a lot of fun discussing the franchise at large in this video with you guys. And as I said before, make sure you share your rankings down below in the comment section, because part of the funness, having that conversation with you guys in the comment section down below. And since there are so many Turtle fans and all these different variations are quite different, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of variations in the list. So I'm very excited to talk about it in the comment section down below. Thank you guys. As always, check out the rankings though. I always do appreciate it. Make sure you like on the video and also subscribe to the channel so you update reviews, reactions, unboxings, and more. The next time though, I'll see you guys later.